You may have noticed that every American military branch had essentially the same fitness test up until the last few years, but this is not because training to the test is the best way to get selected. The secret about selection for every branch is that the fitness test is just to get your foot in the door. Strength is way more important than calisthenics. Water con and fin swims are far more important than your slick 500-yard swims, and your timed 1.5 or 2 mile runs will more than double in distance. In this video, I'll reveal the real purpose of fitness tests, share the most overlooked aspects of preparation, and at the end I'll provide a hierarchy of needs for how you should prioritize your training. But what is the real purpose of fitness tests? One school of thought says they exist to identify the fittest candidates, and the other says they're designed to weed out those who are not physically prepared. And while it seems like a trivial difference between the two, the purpose of the fitness test has major implications in how you should prepare for selection. Here's a thought exercise. Stick with me here. If you were to think about buds, where you'll run timed 4-mile runs in soft sand, carry logs in boats, and do multi-mile ocean fin swims, clearly the most effective way to identify successful candidates would include a 1.5-mile run on concrete, push-ups and sit-ups, and a 500-yard combat side stroke in a pool without fins. I hope you caught my sarcasm. But now, if you were to think of the quickest and most cost-effective way to weed out candidates through a test which requires virtually no equipment, you can't get much better than calisthenics and a timed run and swim. I hope you understand now that the fitness test is not that way by coincidence. The fitness test is designed to quickly and easily weed out candidates rather than make you successful at selection. Once you understand this, it naturally follows that training to the test is not the optimal way to train. Instead, what I do as a coach is train for what predicts selection success, and while it varies slightly from branch to branch, there are universal principles. Here are the 4 most overlooked and important aspects of training. First is strength. All too often, I'm asked how to go from 70 to 90 push-ups, and that's a great goal if you're already strong and running fast. But if you are asking this, you're probably over-indexing on a metric of success, your body weight push-up and sit-up count, which in the grand scheme of training does not offer significant returns. After all, how many guys go to selection and wish they did more push-ups? What you're more likely to hear is they struggle on their rucks, runs, or they just mentally crumbled under the weight of such high training volume. So instead of focusing on calisthenics, go one layer deeper in your training and focus on exercises which will not only improve your calisthenics, but also significantly benefit you at selection. Heavy squatting, deadlifting, pressing, and pulling, including weighted calisthenics, will do exactly that. Will you be number 1 in the class in push-ups or pull-ups with this training? Probably not, but you will be more prepared than if you hyper-focused on just maximizing body weight calisthenics. A very similar scenario exists with swimming and water confidence. For those of you training for Air Force A&S or BUDS, there is no set of skills more overlooked than water confidence. I've created a 10-minute master guide on the channel on how to go from zero to expert, which you can check out. The point is that proficiency in freestyle or the combat side stroke does not mean you're confident in the water. To be successful, you need to master treading, underwaters, buddy breathing, and acclimate your feet to long fin swims. And this is not just my assessment from the many athletes I've coached. This comes directly from the RAND Corporation's research on how to optimize the training and selection process for Air Force Special Warfare candidates. They found that while the entrance test did correlate with attrition rates, there were significant gaps. And when they included a basic water skills test, which included a timed tread, buddy breathing, and underwaters, they were able to better predict who would and would not be selected. And I want to be clear that this was not a purely academic study. One of the many recommendations Air Force Special Warfare applied was creating the 8-week prep course which now exists immediately following boot camp and trains candidates with a special focus on water confidence in addition to strength and endurance. Furthermore, the Air Force even developed its own new fitness tests, not for civilians, but for operators who are currently serving, called the Operator Fitness Test. In the Army, multiple studies have been conducted on similar topics and found that rucking is far and away the greatest predictor of selection success, more so than even APFT scores. To put this into context, the top 25% of ruckers had a 67% selection rate, while those in the top 25% of APFT scores had a 48% selection rate. Clearly, rucking is underrated given it's not on the APFT. What's the best way to improve it? According to a NATO technical report, which analyzed 8 studies on exactly this, it was determined that the top predictors of fast ruck times were fat mass, lean mass, height, and VO2 max. The only one of these which is tested on the APFT is the VO2 max in the form of a timed run. I hope it's becoming clear now that a candidate in any branch who trains solely to the test will be gravely underprepared. But there's one other aspect of training which is highly underrated and results in major setbacks if you don't take it seriously, and that is being healthy. Attrition rates are upwards of 70% in every branch, so if you show up broken, your odds of getting selected will be very low, if not zero. But staying healthy, at least in your training, is actually pretty simple. There are exercises I like, including cable external rotations, tib raises, and also shoulder mobility work, but I don't always include those. The reason why is because I'm programming a balanced, regimented program, which if you're doing one with good technique, is going to result in much lower risk of injury. How this ties into fitness tests is that training to the test will result in imbalances, which can result in injury. Here are 3 principles you should follow to optimize your training routine. First is a relatively even balance between pushing and pulling volume. What this does is ensure proper shoulder health and balance between the front and back of the body. So if we do 7 sets of horizontal pushing, like bench press and push-ups, I'll want to balance that out with about 7 or more sets of horizontal pulling movements, like barbell or seated cable rows. Where calisthenics guys go wrong is doing hundreds of push-ups per day, which are not being counteracted by any horizontal pulling. The visual representation of this training is poor posture, called kyphosis, where someone has rounded, rolled forward shoulders, and this poor posture often leads to shoulder impingement and other issues. The second principle is exercise variation. While you need consistency in your training to progressive overload on movements like squats, lunges, pushes, and pulls, there is a risk associated with doing these same exercises at high volumes. And to be clear, I'm not talking about a risk of 20 or 30 reps of back squats per week. What I'm talking about is hundreds of push-ups in calisthenics that many candidates do every single day, which without any exercise variation can lead to overuse injury. And what makes overuse injuries so pernicious is training through them will only make it worse. Here's how you can apply exercise variation to your routine. If you were doing 100 pull-ups per day or every other day, instead do 20 reps of weighted pull-ups, 1 unweighted set of pull-ups for max reps, and then barbell rows or seated cable rows. And you can repeat this a few times per week. The benefit of this approach is you spread your training volume across your entire back versus hammering your body with one movement. And it also allows for you to pull a different lever in your training. Instead of just adding more reps, you can focus on increasing weight as well. But if you still want to do daily pull-ups, at least switch up your grip position or try other options like ring pull-ups. Just be aware that more often than not, your elbows will be the first to give out, and your shoulders or wrists will be on push-ups. The third training strategy is to increase your volume intelligently. The way I like to approach training volume is that as a beginner, it will go up over time and then begin to stabilize, both for running and weightlifting. The reason why is because even though volume is necessary for improvement, you will reach diminishing returns. Instead, we can keep our weightlifting volume relatively static and focus on increasing the weight. Or for running, we can keep our total time training similar while focusing on increasing our pace from session to session. This shifts the focus of training from arbitrary metrics like reps, sets, or miles to improving the leading indicators of selection performance, which are speed and strength. If you follow those 3 principles, you are far more likely to stay injury-free. And I actually have a free program to bulletproof yourself for selection, which follows these same principles, and you can find that linked in the description. Now let's talk about the hierarchy of training needs and each of the stages you'll need to advance through to be successful. At your base, you have your fundamental fitness. This is where you build your initial confidence through sustaining a few months of running, weightlifting, and swimming to meet the basic fitness requirements. The next phase is nutrition and recovery, and while this should be a focal point through all aspects of your training journey, it becomes especially paramount as you seek to advance from building your fundamental fitness to more advanced endurance and stamina. And building your advanced endurance, your runs may go from 60 minutes to upwards of 90 minutes, and all of a sudden, you're now hitting competitive run and also strength numbers. But it's no surprise because not only have you leveled up your training, but to this point you've also dialed in your nutrition and recovery in the previous phase. The next step up in your training is developing specific physical skills. These are the skills which are critical to your success, but which up to this point you've been improving through general training like running and weightlifting. Now it's time to up the frequency and intensity of your rucking with advanced techniques like the ones in the master guide on the channel. And also you should pivot your training to timed 4 and 5 mile runs. At the top of the pyramid is mental toughness and resilience. This is the self-actualization stage, where after many months or even a year or more of hard training, you look at your training log and realize that the future self you wanted to become all along is actually the person you are today. And it's not by coincidence or surprise this happens. It's only through doing hard work consistently that you achieve your performance goals, and more importantly, the confidence in your ability to overcome any obstacle which comes your way. And by this point, it's clear that a 4-part fitness test is a simple prerequisite on your journey to getting selected. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and to learn the smartest way to train for special operations, click the video on the screen.